Hi, I'm Caroline and welcome to my studio. Would you like to know different ways of painting birch trees in watercolor? Today I'm going to show you 4 different ways of doing that. This is the material for all 4 different birch trees. Starting with some kind of cotton paper, I'm using Arch 300 grams fine grain. The masking fluid PBO drawing gum is the one I prefer. You can use whichever brand you like. I always have a water bottle on hand. These are the colors: Paynes blue gray, yellow ochre light. You can use regular yellow ochre if you want to, and French ultramarine. Feel free to change the colors to whatever you want. I have some tissue paper, masking tape. This is just regular painter's tape. A cut up plastic card of some sort. Bar of soap to clean your brushes. A pencil and 3 different brushes. A bigger round brush. I'm using this worn out brush. Around 6 brush and my rigger number 3. And a heating tool is good to have on hand if you don't want to wait for your paint to dry. Okay, so to make the first birch tree, I'm using the card, and we are going to use paint straight out of the tube. So I'm gonna put some on my palette here, and I'm not gonna use any water with that. And this way is the easiest and fastest way of painting birch trees. And I'm gonna start over here on my paper. Hope you can see this. So I'm just putting my card in the paint, and the trick here is to get some paint but not too much, and you're just gonna drag your card. I'm dragging from the left to the right because I'm right-handed. I turn my card around, and maybe you need to refill it with some more paint, and you put it down and you drag, and you can go over the same spot again if you want to, if you feel you haven't got enough paint on there. And with this you get a birch effect, tree bark, and everything is in just this Paynes blue-gray color. And you can do some branches, of course, without using a brush. But they are going to get really straight since the card doesn't bend like that. So there you have the first birch tree. Really simple, really quick. And if you wanted to have some more branches, you can take your rigger brush, dip it in some water and take some color on your brush and make some branches with it. And this is the simplest and fastest way to do birch trees. Let's draw up a tree over here. Let's say you wanted a tree here, and maybe you want some sort of branch. Well, to have a sky or something, you paint around it in this one. And for the sky, I'm using the ultramarine just to show you what I mean. So you want the sky, but you don't want to paint your tree with the sky color that much. We are going to use some ultramarine in the tree also. You need to do like this to paint around everything to get some sky. And I would do it very simply, not that much information. And it's the same with the bottom part, because you need to have some ground for your trees if you don't want them to fly. So that's the way to paint around without masking out anything, just drawing and painting. And I would paint this like I paint all my trees, more or less. It varies, the colors varies, and a little bit of the way I paint, but I do this most of the time. I wet my tree first. Your sky needs to be dry before you do this. Mine probably isn't, but I'm just going to show you. Okay, so here I'm going to take some of the yellow ochre. No, I'm gonna start with, sorry, the ultramarine first. And doing some shadow along in the middle of the tree. I'm gonna soak up a little bit. It was too much. And after the ultramarine, I would take some of the yellow ochre. Maybe you have a sunny day. If you have, you can absolutely have this yellow ochre, but it's optional, of course. And even if not, the birches aren't just white, straight up white. That's gonna look really strange. They reflect what's in the surroundings. And when you are satisfied with your dark, not dark, but with your ultramarine, you can go in with some Paynes gray. And as long as the paper is wet, it's gonna spread and be soft. Like this, and now this needs to dry before I can do anything else with it. So let's go to the next. It's with tape. You can, to be able to do the background without painting around everything, you need to mask off the birch tree, the part that you want to be light. That's the birch trees, and you can mask off anything else. You need to be lighter than the background. So let's say you want to mask with tape. You could use it with straight edges like this, or you can tear it up to get a more what do you call this, rugged edge. I'm just going to show you like this, but now you know that you can do in a different way. So you put down the tape where you want your tree to be, and if you don't want as wide of a tree, tear your tape up, or use not so wide tape. Today my English is doing me in. Okay, so let's do some background to show you why we are using the tape. So now you just paint over the tape to do your background like this. Here you have a simple sky, and maybe we have some distant trees in the background also. And this is Paynes gray, and that is just the ultramarine. Here you have some shrubs and bushes and stuff in the background. I'm not going to focus too much on them because that's not the tutorial, but just for the sake of showing you why we use the tape. And these colors are just the yellow ochre and Paynes gray that I'm putting down just to resemble some sort of ground. And now this needs to dry. Okay, so now this is dry, and you remove your tape and reveal the white paper again to paint the birch tree. And here you have options, of course, how you want to paint it. But I normally do more or less what I did over here. I wet the paper. And how much detail or how you do paint your tree is totally up to you, of course. And for me, it depends on the lighting, what scenery goes on in the painting. So it differs a little bit, but I more or less do the same thing. And I'm gonna start with a really light wash of the blue, and I have some hair. I have a dog, and I've got hair all over, and well, yeah, you probably know if you have pets that they leave their mark. Okay, so now we have some blue, and I'm gonna strengthen the middle part a little bit more. You maybe think that looks really strange, but I'm gonna have the brush again with some clean water. Oh, too much water. I just want to soften this so it spreads a little bit more and doesn't become this line all the way. And I'm adding more shadow at the bottom. Okay, and then we are going to add some of the yellow ochre, just a little bit to show some light, maybe from the ground or the sun or the surroundings. Well, if you're gonna paint light from the sun, you would do it a bit different than this. And how much or how little you want of this is totally up to you, of course. I'm just fixing some of the edges here. Okay. And And now I'm going in with some Paynes gray. I'm gonna start at the bottom. The bottom of the trees normally are darker and more, well, visible lines of this dark bark. Bark is a dog. I don't know if it's called bark on the tree. I hope so. It does in Swedish. And when this dries, I would go in with more details. And try to not do exactly the same on both sides, or exactly the same distances and such, because the trees aren't that even, or what, how do you say, symmetric. It's more asymmetric than symmetric. I'm gonna add more dark down here while it's still wet. And when you add color in a wet area, to get the color not to spread as much, you need to have a thicker consistency than before. So it needs to be thicker to stay in place a little bit more than before. It still spreads, but not as much. And if you think you have done it too dark, like over here there's a lot of dark, you could take away some. Just have a drier brush and clean, and you can take away some. Now my brush is kind of dry. I can do this dry brush technique, but everything needs to be dry before you can do that. Okay, so this needs to totally dry. So I'm gonna leave that for a while, and of course you can do branches and everything you want. And I almost always use my rigger to do branches. And the lighter touch you have, the smaller your branches will be, thinner. And the more you press on your brush, the thicker it gets, of course. And I heard someone say that the dark spots that we see on the birch trees aren't for branches just, it's an eye to get air in the tree. I did not know that. And birches look really different depending on what kind of birch it is and where you find them. So they differ a lot. They aren't all the same. And when you do this stroke, curve it a little bit so you get the curve of the tree. When you do like that, I did, the tree looks flat, and that's not good. So curve them a little bit. And normally I do a couple of those thin lines. And then you have some kind of eye on your tree, on the tree, not your tree. You can choose, of course. I would do some there, and I would do much more detail and branches and stuff, but you get the bigger picture of taping down your tree beforehand, so you can paint the background. And with the masking fluid is more or less the same as this, but you have more control of how your tree will look. So you need to take a brush and your soap and rub your brush in the soap a bit, and not have too wet brush, and dip it in your, I usually do like this. I pour my masking fluid in the lid, and then you have it. And let's say I want a birch tree, a thin one in the distance. So mask out with the masking fluid how I want the tree to stand. And maybe they normally grow a couple of trees near each other. And I don't do all the branches with the masking fluid because most of the branches, the thin one at least, are blackish, darker. But normally you have some branches that are a little bit white. And I clean my brush and do the same. Rub it in the soap, dab it off the paper and dip it again, and continue. And you need to repeat this step of cleaning your brush, dab it in the soap, and paint with the masking fluid. Maybe there are some more branches on that tree. And this is the way you do it. And let your masking fluid dry completely before you start painting the background. And while I'm waiting for the masking fluid to dry, I think it's a perfect time to have a coffee break. Okay, so now my masking fluid has dried. Now is the time to paint all of the background that you want to be done before you remove the masking fluid. Because wherever you put the masking fluid preserves the white of the paper. I would like some sky. Do the sky. So you put down some. And I've mixed the yellow ochre with the Paynes gray. And if you wanted some more details in the background, other trees, you can do that while you still have the masking fluid on. So now this is all wet, so I won't be able to do anything specific, but maybe you want some other kind of trees also. You could do how much or how little you want with the background before you remove the masking fluid. I think we need to anchor the trees a little bit into the ground. I'm just doing something really simple here, just to show you the technique. Like this, and everything needs to dry, so I'm gonna use the heating tool to dry it. Now when the background is all dry, you could absolutely go in and do something more detailed, do a tree of some sort, maybe a what do you call it, spruce trees, well, forest like. And now when everything in the background is done, more or less at least the way you want it, you just rub off the masking fluid. And if you have a lot of masking fluid, I recommend you use a cloth of some sort, a fabric cloth, and rub with that, because otherwise you will hurt your fingers. It's quite rough on your fingers. And you really need to feel that you get everything off, otherwise you can't paint over. Well, so now you have the trees and it's just like before. Start to paint them and maybe enhance some of the ground with some more twigs or whatever you like, wetting the tree to start with. And of course there are a lot of ways to paint birch trees. This is just 4 of the ways I know, and there are a lot of ways to do the tree and what colors to use and how you want to paint it. That was a bit too much color. You can dab off any part that you think has got too much color. And you do the same with the small trees in the distance, but the further away, the less details they should have. So the closer they get, the more details. Now for some of the yellow, a little bit here and there, not too much. I wet my brush with clean water and dab it off on the paper towel. You can maybe write in the comments if you have English as your language, if it's called bark on a tree, just like dog's bark. I don't know. In Swedish it's bark at least. And I don't have a lot of paint on my brush, that's why I can get this streaky look. And if we let this dry, we can continue building up layers of more color and contrast. So this is the 4 ways of painting birch trees. Thank you for watching and see you next time.